Hey, how's it going? And I'm super excited to bring you this tutorial on key concepts in the sequencer and using camera cuts. I have to be completely honest with you, and I have struggled to understand sequencer. It is not intuitive at all to me, and if you watched some of my previous tutorials, you've seen me flounder and get confused through it. And over time, and with just a lot of persistence and study, it's finally starting to make sense to me, and I want to share with you things that have helped me to understand how to use the camera cuts. The name itself is confusing. It really should just be called camera switcher. I have no idea why it's called camera cuts. I just can never get my mind around that concept. So anyway, all we're going to do today, trying to keep this as simple as possible, is we're just going to film an animated cube going across the scene. So this is what kind of it looks like. The one thing I noticed was this camera cuts, this camera switcher, once you get your mind around it, it can really help you with your editing, because you can play things back and edit things, switch between views, and really get a handle on what's a smooth cut or is a good transition point. So this can really help you with your editing, like a lot of editing software programs. But getting past the initial confusion of what everything is and where everything is, it's not like anything I've ever seen before. It's not like anything else. It has elements of other things. It seems like it would be its own beast. And I think that's where people get into trouble. And I know that's where I got into trouble. So anyway, just to start, we're going to go to new project, and we're just going to go to first person, no starter content, and we don't need to save anything there. And this just, of course, takes a second to load up. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was understanding this conceptually. And I've said before, it seems like you just bring a camera into the scene and you'd hit record and that would be it, but that's not how it works here. So I hope this helps you. This is what helped me to understand it. We're in a level right now, also known as a map. So everything in that level can be thought of as a noun. It's a person, place, or thing. But like a noun, it's inanimate. It's static. It's not moving. Nothing in that scene has life. And if we were to film this, it would just be dead. But to even film this, we would need to bring a camera in. So in a sense, you can think of it as a dead scene. There's nothing alive there. It's just things. Unreal Engine calls those things actors. But basically you can think of everything on the level as a noun. The sequencer is where you can basically turn nouns into verbs. So verbs are anything that has an action. So anything that has an action exists on the sequencer. Anything that does not have an action exists on the level as it is right now. So if we want to film a scene and bring it to life, and that's what the sequencer's for, Unreal Engine themselves describes sequencer as a multi-track editor used for creating and previewing cinematic sequences. Basically, I think of it as verbizing nouns. We're taking static objects and we're giving them life, including the camera itself. So the main purpose of the sequencer is to be able to render out film and video clips or cutscenes. So that's what this is, and that helped me to finally understand what the purpose of the sequencer is. So I never fully understood it until I started thinking of it that way. So anyway, to get started on this, I'm just going to select this cube right here, and I'm going to hit F2 to rename it, and I'm just going to call it cube so it stands out above everybody else a little bit there. And then, like I said, right now it exists as a noun. It's just a cube. I want to turn it into a moving cube. So now I need to put it into the sequencer if I want to turn it from a noun into a verb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into track. I'm going to go add to sequencer, actor to sequencer, and there's the cube right there. So now I'm in the process of turning this cube from a noun into a verb. So here on Let's Transform, I can move it on any one of these 9 dimensions, and I'm just going to animate all of them even though I don't need to. So I'm going to set a keyframe right there. I'm going to turn on auto keyframe. And the one thing I'd like to explain down here, this always confused me too, but you have down here a working range start and a working range end. And basically you can think of this as padding for your timeline. So if you like having padding on your timeline, and I do, then what you can do is here it's -24, but over here you'll notice it comes right up to the edge, and I don't like that. So if I just typed in 500 here and then stretch this bar out, you see how all the padding I have here now? And I like that. I like having padding on each side of the timeline. And now let's say I want to make this a 10-second clip. I'm just going to drag this out to about there. And now the animation will play out to that way. So this is just for padding. If I wanted more padding over here, I could just increase this to -50. And then I drag this bar and I have more padding on each side of the timeline. So this just gives you some breathing room there. So now we're ready to animate the cube. And all I have to do is just, well, we're here, and the first step would be to move the playhead here. So we're going to move it to the end, and now we are just going, because we have our keyframe set, so we're going to just drag it here and up, and you'll see that when I do, you see this line come in. So it recognizes that it's being animated. Now there's a lot more things you can do. There's a curve editor in here, but we're not going to get into that today. So all I have to do now is hit here, hit the beginning, and hit play, and now we have a moving cube. I brought animation to life by adding keyframes in the sequencer, turning a noun into a verb. So now we got that. So now we want to film this, and this brings up our next thing that we're going to do. To film it now, we have to add a camera to the scene. That's very easy to do. And all we have to do is click on this camera icon. Now it brings in a camera over here, and we can explain a little bit of this. That means it's spawned in, and pending take, all that means is if we wanted to use a take recorder, the take recorder is ready to go. It's always ready to go to film a take. So, but we're not going to use the take recorder today. We're going to just stay within the sequencer. We actually don't need to use a take recorder if we don't want to. We can do everything we need in the sequencer. So if you're not ready to deal with the take recorder, don't worry about it. Now here on this, I'm just going to go ahead and rename this. So you hit F2, and I'm just going to call this Cam 1 just so it's a little bit clearer to me. And as you can see, we have it down here, and we can animate it as well. It has its own controls that are all animated, has its own transform and everything. So it's been brought into the scene. It too, in a sense, is a noun, and if we wanted to move it or animate it, we could do that as well. But actually we're not going to animate it, we're just going to position it for one shot. So we're not going to be animating it, but it does need to be brought into the sequencer so it can render out. So in order for it to render out, it's got to be in the sequencer here. Now the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to, and there's so many little icons on here, this icon is really important. So what I'd like you to think about camera cuts is if they just called this camera switcher, I think it would have made everybody's life so much easier, because that's basically what it is. It's just switching. You can switch to other things, but it basically, for our purposes filming, just think of it as a camera switcher, because that's what we use it for. And it's confusing. When we click here, we're just getting the general view of our scene right here. But when we click here, it basically gives us our camera's view. And when we click here, we don't see a change because it's also giving us our camera's view too. So this is a very handy, probably one of the most important icons on this whole sequencer is that little camera, because it allows you to switch your views between your cameras from what's going to be filmed from basically the master sequence here and to what the individual cameras are seeing. So right now we're seeing what camera 1 is seeing. If we don't want to see what camera 1's seeing, we just turn that off and we can see the entire scene as it is. So if we hit play from this perspective, we can kind of see the whole scene as it exists. But if we want to see what the camera's seeing, we click there, and now we see what the camera's seeing. And of course we want to see what the camera's seeing because that's what we're going to be filming. So for this first shot, all I have to do is I can go back to the first frame. I'm not animating the camera here now. I'm just positioning it for the first shot. So I can use my WASD keys. One thing I like to do is slow the camera down, and we're just going to, well, it really slows it down, but it's easier for me that way just because, I mean, this is a little too slow, but it always does this too. Maybe I can go to 2. That's a little better. Okay, so maybe 2 is more my speed. Okay, so I'm just setting up for the initial shot here, and Q goes down, and I'm just using the WASD keys. So I just want this initial shot so we see the cube, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more about editing in just a minute here. So let's hit play and see what we see. There goes our cube. Okay, and it's off. So now I've got my first shot, and now I want to bring in another camera. So all I have to do is click this icon here, I'll minimize this for now. And now another camera's come in. I can come over here and press F2 and rename it Cam 2 just for convenience. I'm seeing what camera 2 is seeing right now. And again, this is what camera 1's seeing, this is what camera 2's seeing. So now for camera 2, I want to reposition my shot to more of a wide shot of the whole scene. So what I'm going to do here is I'm on camera 2. I should be able to pull out here, and I'm going to come back, and I'm just trying to get my camera positioned in kind of a wider angle, and maybe I'm going to go up here a little bit. And then on camera 2, I can adjust all of its settings over here on the its details panel. So rather than move the camera, if I got to be on the camera here. Where is it? Here it is. On its details panel, I have all the usual controls, and what I can do is just go to a wider lens to adjust my. I'm still seeing what Cam 2 is seeing, so I'm just adjusting myself. And let's say I want a higher, kind of looking down, seeing E is up. Whatever shot you want to get, it's really up to you. But let's say I just want kind of a general overview shot like that, right? I'm satisfied with that. I mean, I could play around with this all day. So let's say that's my second camera position, and I'm satisfied with that. So I can, again, see what the master sequence is showing. Basically, this is showing what camera 1's showing, and this is the perspective of camera 2. So now let's say if I want to now switch from camera 1 to camera 2, what I could do is go back to the beginning, hit play. Well, I'm seeing camera 2 right there. I want to see camera 1, so go back. This can really help you with editing, learning editing, because if I go back to the beginning and I hit play, where's a good point to cut? And I'll tell you where a good point to cut is. Right when it's about halfway out of the frame. That probably is going to be your best cut point right there. So right there, and then we'll click here, and we're going to go switch to camera 2 now, and you'll see it's changed up here. So now if I come back to the beginning and I hit play, we should see there. And why didn't camera, what's confusing is, see, this icon is so important. I'm seeing what camera 1's seeing. I have to click there to see the whole thing. So this is why I say these icons are so important, because it controls basically your perspective of what you're seeing. So now that I'm on the camera switcher, I can see both cuts. So here we go. Now it should cut to the second camera. So, and you can play around with these transition points too. So that's that. Maybe I want to cut it, let's say, a little bit earlier. So what I can do is I can literally just click and drag on cam 2 and drag it over a little sooner. So let's do that. And there we go. So that's it. And then if we want to render it out, we just click here, and there's a lot of videos on how to render out here. So anyway, I hope you found that helpful, and I hope to be doing a little bit more tutorials on the sequencer because it is so important. But thank you very much, and have a great day, and we'll talk again later. Hey, I'm back. I wanted to give a quick update. In the tutorial, I was trying to avoid talking about the take recorder because I believe that's its own beast, but I realized after I closed out of the project that without doing a take recorder, we hadn't actually backed up or saved a copy of our sequence. So unfortunately, I did need to add a little postscript on about the take recorder. So what I did was I just kind of mocked up the scene as we had it before. We had cam 1, cam 2, we've got our edit in here, and then we have our camera switcher. I'm going to call it camera switcher instead of camera cuts. And so let's say we're ready to record. Well, before we do that, really what we need to do is we need to record the sequence, because it's not technically recorded. We can render it out, but it's not really recorded. And if we were to close out of the project and we came back, we wouldn't have anything. And then I realized I couldn't leave you guys like that. So what we have to do is, once we have our sequence to our liking, we do have to record it and save it essentially in the project. We need to go to the take recorder, and for source, it actually says camera cuts right here. And so we have to add it here. And then all we have to do here is just click record, and now it's going to go ahead and record our sequence that we did. And then once it gets past that mark, we hit stop. It puts us back into the sequencer, but now we have a recording of the sequence. So where is the recording? It's in the content browser. If we come to cinematics, go takes, it's right here now. And if we clicked on it, it's going to just take us back to the sequencer here. Well, it takes us in, but it's all locked down. Now, the other thing I was going to tell you, as you're messing around with this, if you want to then move on to your next scene, there was one other thing I meant to tell you was, if we click on this, we can re-edit our sequence. We're back to being able to re-edit it, just like we kind of were before. But let's say you maybe made a cut and you didn't mean to. Like, let's say you switched cameras and you decided you didn't want to have that in there. All you have to do is just click on it, and you can literally just delete it. And then you can come here and extend your other shot, however you want to do it. So I just needed to add that as a postscript, because if you don't take record it, you won't have the sequence recorded, and if you come back into the project, it won't be there. So anyway, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't include that before, but I was just trying to avoid talking about the take recorder, but there's really no way to avoid it. So these two are like double trouble, so they come together. Oh, as I see this, if you wanted to, let's say, continue on in your filming, if you want to say now you're doing a whole new sequence of shots, these are easily renameable. So you can just rename this to now scene underscore or underscore 2, and you can rename these two. So you can rename your scenes from here and just keep going and going and going. Okay, anyway, that's all I had for today, and thank you so much.